Imagine this. You wake up one morning, and everything just feels wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Not just, a bad day, but like the whole reality is kind of shifted under you.
Right.
You're suddenly stuck in some situation that's totally illogical, it's overwhelming, and it feels completely out of your control.
Yeah.
Maybe you feel tangled up in like some nightmarish bureaucracy trying to figure out rules that keep changing.
With no way out.
Exactly. No clear path, no one really in charge. That feeling, that suffocating, disorienting feeling,
That's it.
that right there is Kafkaesque.
And that feeling, that really specific disorientation you just described, it comes straight from the mind of, well, one of the 20th century's most important literary figures, Franz Kafka.
Right.
He's famous, of course, for this uniquely dark, disorienting, and kind of surreal writing style.
So today that's our mission. We want to really unpack what it means for something to be Kafkaesque. We're going to look at Kafka's own life, see how maybe his experiences shaped this vision.
Definitely.
Then we'll dive into some of his most famous stories to see it in action.
Yeah, the classics.
And finally, try to figure out why this term and his ideas still hit so hard today, even a century later.
Okay, so to really get a handle on Kafkaesque, we kind of have to start at the beginning, right? With Kafka's early life and his family dynamics.
Makes sense.
Franz Kafka was born in Prague, 1883. His father, Hermann, was quite a character.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a really successful, self-made businessman, came up from the working class, apparently through sheer willpower and this brash, aggressive personality.
Okay, so a strong figure. And I gather Herman had some pretty high expectations for Franz.
Huge expectations, yeah. He wanted a son, basically like himself,
Yeah.
robust, successful.
But Franz wasn't like that.
Not at all. From what we know, he was born a small, anxious, and sickly boy, and pretty much stayed that way.
Oh, wow. So that must have caused some friction.
Big time. It sounds like Franz was a constant disappointment to his father. He kind of became what some biographers call a psychological punching bag.
Oof. That's rough.
Yeah. Herman was apparently relentless in trying to mold him, so it's maybe not surprising that Franz turned to writing.
As an escape.
As a way to deal with it all, yeah. This increasing sense of anxiety, guilt, and self-hatred he felt. Writing was his refuge.
But the father, Herman, he wasn't exactly supportive of this writing ambition.
No, not really. He basically set the rules for Franz's life, pushed him hard towards a career in law.
Even though Franz really wanted to write.
Exactly. Despite that deep urge. Which, yeah, brings us to the next phase, the sort of grind of his professional life.
Right, the day job.
Even while he was studying law, Kafka kept writing on the side. And that's when he met Max Brod.
Ah, Max Brod, crucial figure.
Absolutely crucial. One of his only real friends. And it was Brod who later talked Kafka into publishing his first 3 collections.
How did those do? Any early success?
Sadly, no. They sold very poorly. Just essentially went unnoticed.
So no validation there. And after college, he followed his father's wishes.
Yeah.
Went into law.
He did. Worked in a law office first, and then, maybe most significantly for his writing, he got a job at a workers' accident insurance company.
Okay, and this insurance job. This is where things get really Kafkaesque for him personally, right?
You could definitely say that. I mean, think about it. Long hours, unpaid overtime, massive amounts of paperwork, and absurd, complex bureaucratic systems.
Sounds soul-crushing.
He was, understandably miserable. But here's the thing, he kept writing.
On the side, after those long days.
Yeah, in stolen hours. And this is when he produced some of his absolute masterpieces, like The Trial, The Castle, America.
Wow. So the misery fueled the creativity.
It seems like it, but here's the really heartbreaking part. He did not attempt to publish any of these at the time.
Why not?
He just didn't think they were any good. He believed they were unworthy.
That's unbelievable. So he's writing these iconic works and thinks they're failures.
Pretty much, and he stayed in that professional grind for most of his life, which sadly wasn't very long.
He died young, right?
Very young, just 41 in 1924. Tuberculosis. And he never saw any real success or recognition for his writing while he was alive.
So he went to his grave thinking his best work wasn't good enough.
It seems so. He actually told Max Brod on his deathbed to burn all his unpublished manuscripts. Everything.
No, but Brod didn't.
Thank goodness Brod did not follow instructions. It's maybe one of the most consequential acts of disobedience in literary history.
So what did Brod do?
He spent the next year or so carefully organizing everything, publishing Kafka's notes, his novels, his stories.
And the result?
The result was astonishing. Within, A decade of his death, Kafka became this towering figure, one of the most important literary and philosophical voices of the 20th century.
The irony is just staggering.
It really is. He lived his whole life feeling inadequate, especially in his father's eyes, completely unaware of the legacy he was creating.
Yeah, it really makes you think, doesn't it? How many other people like Kafka might have lived and died, completely disconnected or restricted from ever seeing who they really are or could be?
It's a powerful thought. Unsettling, even.
But thankfully, Broad saved the work. And that work gave us this whole new way to describe a certain kind of experience.
Exactly. It gave us the word Kafkaesque.
Okay, so let's try and nail this down. When people say Kafkaesque, what usually comes to mind first? Is it just like frustrating bureaucracy?
That's definitely the most common starting point, yeah.
Yeah.
The endless queues, the nonsensical forms, the feeling of being lost in a huge, impersonal system.
Like the DMV example, or trying to deal with customer service sometimes.
Right. That kind of complex, unclear process where nobody seems to know what's going on and the system itself just doesn't care about you as an individual.
But you mentioned earlier, it goes deeper than that.
It does. The term often points to that bureaucratic nightmare, sure.
Yeah.
But the quality of Kafkaesque, I think, extends much further. It's really about the reaction of the person stuck in that system.
Ah, okay. The individual's experience.
And what that experience might represent. Maybe we can look at a couple of his stories to see this.
Yeah, let's do that. The trial is probably the most famous example, right?
Definitely. So the protagonist, Joseph K., he's just suddenly arrested at his home one morning.
Out of the blue.
Completely out of the blue. And crucially, he's never told why. No charge is ever specified.
Hey, already weird.
And then he's forced through this long, absurd trial. Nothing makes sense. The court is disorganized, maybe corrupt. It's illogical.
And does he ever find out why he was arrested?
Never. That's the point. By the end, he's still never told why, and yet he remains guilty of his final conviction.
Wow. Just guilty of nothing specific? That's terrifying.
It's pure illogic, pure powerlessness.
What about Metamorphosis? Another really famous one. Very different premise, though.
Very different, but maybe similar themes underneath. Gregor Samsa, the main character, he awakes into having suddenly been turned into an insect. Again, no clear explanation.
All right, the giant bug.
Yeah. But what's fascinating is his immediate reaction isn't existential horror, it's practical anxiety.
Like what?
His first thoughts are about getting to work, dealing with his boss, how he's going to support his family, who are described as inconsiderately needy.
So even as a giant insect, his concerns are mundane.
Yeah.
Bureaucratic, almost.
In a way, yes, he's trapped in this monstrous form, but his initial struggles are with the demands of his human life. Of course, as an insect, he can't meet those demands. He feels this increased dread, becomes a useless nuisance to his family.
So in both stories, the trial and Metamorphosis, you have these protagonists hit by sudden, totally absurd situations.
Right, with no explanations.
And crucially, no real chance of overcoming them. They're just completely outmatched.
Exactly, outmatched by these arbitrary, senseless obstacles, mainly because they can't understand or control any of what is happening.
Okay, so that lack of understanding, that lack of control against something absurd, that's getting closer to the core of Kafkaesque.
I think so. What's really fascinating is how Kafka's whole style seems built around this confrontation with the absurd.
Confrontation?
Yeah.
How so?
Well, it's this fundamental conflict, right? Where a character tries to use logic, reason, their sense of how the world should work.
And it just bounces off.
Exactly. It's met with these inescapable parameters of senselessness, where success isn't just impossible, it's kind of pointless anyway.
But they still try.
And yet they try anyway. That's key.
So is this Kafka's take on the human condition then? This sort of fundamental mismatch?
That's a very common interpretation, yeah. This constant, unyielding desire we have for answers, for meaning, for control over things like anxiety, guilt, suffering, the absurdity of it all.
But paired with this total inability to ever really understand or control the source of the problems?
Precisely. We can't grasp the source, so we can't effectively overcome them.
Okay. But you said they keep trying. That seems important.
It's maybe the most important part. Even when faced with these completely despairing, absurd situations, Kafka's characters, they don't just roll over and give up. Well, not at first, anyway.
Well, they fight back.
They continue on and fight against their situations. They try to reason their way out, understand it, work through the senselessness.
But it doesn't work.
But in the end, as you said, it is ultimately to no avail.
So if we zoom out, what's the bigger picture message here? Is Kafka saying the struggle itself is the problem?
That's one really interesting way to look at it, that maybe The struggle to find solace and understanding is both inescapable and impossible.
And by fighting against the absurdity.
We, ironically, only serve to self-perpetuate the very struggle we're trying to resolve. Because we're trying to resolve something that can't be resolved.
Wow. It's like, on some deep level, we almost want the struggle.
It's a deeply unsettling, but maybe resonant idea. And because Kafka's work is so vague, surreal, and inexplicable, it really does open itself up to so many readings.
Right.
You know, maybe we should just accept the absurdity, or maybe we should fight against it, even if it's futile. Or maybe the point is we can't know what the idea is.
Only Kafka knew for sure.
And, you know, it's fair to speculate that maybe even he didn't fully grasp every layer of it.
But what we do know for sure is his incredible impact on literature, philosophy, just how we think about things.
Undeniable, his work has helped so many people around the world feel less alone in their own, hunches of truth, or those moments where life feels intensely Kafkaesque.
Maybe that's because his own story, while unique in its details, touches on things we all experience.
I think that's exactly it. His story, it feels cruel and sad in many ways, but the elements aren't necessarily that unusual.
Like what kind of elements?
Well, think about it. To be born into a faulty family, or maybe a difficult place, or even just feeling like you're in a weak body or brain, that's common.
Sure.
To live and die having never recognized one's full potential, sadly common too. To feel stuck in a bureaucratic cog of a job or a government system.
Deeply relatable for many.
Or just feeling that weight, that guilt and anxiety of existence for no clear reason. Who hasn't felt that sometimes?
So you're saying his work isn't great because it's about something totally alien?
Exactly. It's great not because it describes something profoundly unique, but because it describes something mundanely common in a profound way.
It gives shape to that feeling.
Yes. It's an encapsulation of an often indescribable experience, a part of life that in some way touches us all.
There's a quote from the writer Anne Rice that seems relevant here.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
She said, Kafka's work provides a remedy, but not through false hope. Instead, it's through the direct confrontation with the darker aspects of self.
Interesting.
By distorting reality, she argued, he revealed a certain remedy of unhindered self-examination and carved out a place in the world for others to do the same.
That's powerful. Facing the darkness to understand it better.
Which kind of connects back to something Kafka himself wrote in a letter, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It feels like his writing reminds us. It's not that we want to give up.
No.
But that despite all the absurdity, all the problems, we wish to continue. We want to struggle to forge our own way.
We want to connect.
Yeah, connect over honesty.
Yeah.
Right. However hard it may be to face that honesty.
So, okay. We've unpacked quite a bit here. Kafka's life, where Kafkaesque comes from, the deep, sometimes dark truths his work brings up about just being human.
We have. And maybe for final thought, something for you to consider.
Mm-hmm.
In this world where we're always pushing for answers, for understanding, for control, maybe Kafka's real genius is showing us that liberation doesn't come from finding those final answers, but maybe from the simple, really profound act of just continuing to strive, to connect with others, to seek honesty, even when, maybe especially when, the universe just throws absurdity back at us.
So the question becomes...
Yeah, what does it mean for you personally to embrace that struggle?